Good afternoon, Thursday, April 6th, and we are a couple of weeks out from the 2023 Annual National Football League Player Selection Meeting, otherwise, excuse me, otherwise known as the NFL Draft. Now, when watching the draft, and if you are one of those that views lists, prospective lists, or mock drafts, or puts together one of your own, fantastic. For those that do not, who just enjoy the draft and would like to learn more about it and thus learn more about football, we have to understand how prospects arrive at their prospect status. Okay, now it's two-pronged. First, there is their record of achievement and on-field production while in college, playing football at the college ranks. That's not where it ends. In most cases, they then, once the season is complete and the player is draft eligible, they will be invited to a combine with other players from around the nation. And they also will have private workouts. Sometimes colleges will have the workout because colleges like Alabama, of course, have multiple professional prospects on there and just from a logistical standpoint on their team. So from a logistical standpoint, it just makes sense to get everybody all together at once. Take a look at these prospects. Now, having outstanding production is going to get you an invite. That's going to be kind of the first step, in this two-pronged process. Oftentimes, it is in conjunction with the second part of the process, the combine process, which is a measuring of various skills, a measuring of, 40-yard dash time, strength in terms of how many times you can bench press 225 pounds, your various times in drills, your hand size, your arm length, height, weight, things of this nature, as well as, you also get like a little bit of a medical evaluation there. And it's obviously more in depth on a personal basis with the teams. And this is where the teams and the NFL will say, okay, you had this production, were you an anomaly in that you arrived at it with substandard physical talent, or does the physical talent match the production and quote unquote, it makes sense? Then you'll get other individuals that are invited to the combine that might not have had the production in college, but that, they want to take a look at their measurables. Baltimore selected a guy from Penn State and a few years back, and this guy played with Micah Parsons, and he was a rush guy, and he had 0 sacks, which I'm thinking, you play with Micah Parsons, aren't you going to at least fall into one? So this guy did not have the production, okay, that Parsons did, but they got this kid to the combine, and lo and behold, here he is. He's 6'5", he's 262 pounds, okay, and he runs in the high 4.4s. And so Baltimore takes this kid in the first round, outside linebacker, rush guy. And the thing what's interesting about that is that's normally not Baltimore's MO. They do like the production, and they do like to be very sound in their drafting as opposed to swinging for the fences, which is kind of what you're doing when you're taking a physical marvel that does not have the production numbers. You are gambling that with that physical talent, you're going to be able to get incredible production out of him, and thus it is kind of a gamble. Now, this is the pooling of, these two, one, your history, and two, your physical ability in real time, like right now, okay? And they get a chance to do a close-up eye test because these cats have seen players play and they can look at them up close and oftentimes get an even better idea, in their minds that, okay, this guy's a player. So these are kind of the ways that, you can, the ways that you can observe the draft and understand what category a player falls into if, it is indeed one or the other. You take guys like Zach Thomas, Tom Brady, that had good production in college, but that did not perform particularly well at the combine. I don't even know if Zach Thomas went to the combine, but his measurables were deemed to be, he wasn't particularly, he was on the short side for a linebacker, wasn't super, super fast, like a small linebacker, like a Dexter Coakley or a London Fletcher or somebody like that could really, really, really run, but was not particularly big. But Zach was super productive in college. So he lasted all the way until the 5th round and became an outstanding middle linebacker in the NFL for years, multiple teams, and was very productive, excellent football player. Same with Tom Brady. His combine quote unquote performance or measurables that resulted from his attending that combine were the source of ridicule. Doesn't have a great body, has just non-existent foot speed, in terms of his 40-yard dash time. Not a particularly strong guy, 6'4" and 200, but kind of a thin, gangly 6'4" and 200. But upon further inspection by some teams, at least one, it was determined that this guy was a winner, which he was. Now, interestingly enough, in that process with Tom Brady, the whole time while he's at Michigan, they are bringing in these studs that are 6'4", 225, can run, are big cats, have the cannon for an arm. Now, Brady has a very good arm. It's very underrated. He can spin it, but we're talking about them bringing in cats that have big arms. Like, for instance, of course, the one that comes to mind is Drew Henson, a tremendous athletic prospect, professional football and baseball. Big dude, stud, big arm, really highly regarded and thought to be the guy, whereas Tom Brady was a 3-star guy. Henson was a 5-star guy. Well, they kept bringing these cats in thinking, okay, Brady can hold it down, but this is really who we want to go with. And then time and time again, they would go back to Tom to bail them out. So he had a very unique college, reel of production. He had a very unique college career. And what you could draw from it was, wow, he wasn't a full-time starter, which is usually a bad thing in terms of draft. Being a draft prospect, it's pretty rare, man, that backups get drafted. The thought process being, if you can't start there, how are you going to be able to start at a higher level? But his situation was very unique as he kind of was back and forth between starting and doing a good job and then being benched again, for a stud like Henson physically, whom, as it turned out, Brady was a far superior football player to. Not even close. But again, we're talking about the eye test, the speculation, things of that nature, reputation and so forth. So these are two kind of exceptions to the rule. I think everybody knows the story, or if you're a draft Nick, or if you are as old as I am, you know the story of Mike Mamula, very average football player at Boston College, defensive end, got to the combine and just blew everybody away with his 40 times. And so the Eagles took a very, high pick and drafted him. And you would say it turned out to be a failure. He was average at best, but certainly not what they thought he was going to be. I can remember friends of mine that I played football with. I was still playing at the time. Said, man, this kid from Boston College, man, he's 4'4" guy, 4'3" guy. It's unbelievable. He's going to, he's going to revolutionize the whole process, man, because he's such a stud athlete. And the reason that he didn't go first overall was because he had questionable college production. Now, when you get into how teams draft. Everybody does it differently. But there are some things that you can point to that are fairly common throughout the league. Number one, most, if not all teams, are scouting players that meet what you would call the minimum level of physical proficiency in terms of size for a position. Okay. Speed as well. It gets very in depth in terms of what is also expected and what makes a player draftable for a specific position. Quarterback is a little bit different than offensive tackle. Offensive tackle, they're generally not going to have a guy at OT at offensive tackle that's less than 6'4". The kid from out of Northwestern that plays for the Chargers is one of the exceptions. He's about 6'3", 6'3 and a half, but it's not by much below the 6'4" range, in terms of what they consider, okay, you have reached the level of physical proficiency that we need in terms of size, because you just don't see any 6'2", 6'1". You just don't see offensive tackles that fall below those measurables. Okay, because along with that frame and that height is the arms, is the hands, and the things that you're going to need to be able to do battle with a defensive end opposite you, or an edge rusher or linebacker who's going to, he's going to be, 6'3" to 6'5", 6'6", somewhere in there. He's going to have the long arms and is going to be a sizable guy that, you're going to need this type of physical proficiency to do battle with. Now, what this does is this thins the herd, and it is different for quarterbacks. There are many that have a criteria for quarterbacks. The size thing, it used to be you'd want to be 6'2" to 6'5". Now, because of guys like Drew Brees, Michael Vick, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, these guys they're not all 6'2". As a matter of fact, all those guys are under 6'2", some under 6 foot. So that has changed a little bit in terms of guys showing that size thing didn't matter. Like I said, man, Breeze and Vic and Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray, they knocked that door down. They kicked it down. I mean, the kid from Alabama that's coming out this year in the draft, quarterback, he's a tick over 6 foot and is not particularly big, but because his college production was so good and the kid has a live arm, you can't rule him out because, players like Wilson and them have shown that it can be done at that size. So also, there are many that include in that criteria, they want a quarterback that has at least 25 victories as a starter over 3 to 4 seasons of starting. This allows for, you're at least winning 5 to 6 games a year in 4 years, or 7 to 8 if you're there for 3. That's what they're looking for in that, because they're showing a record of achievement and the ability to produce and to build the ability to lead teams to wins, whether they're good or bad, in terms of the personnel around the quarterback. Also, too, many want their quarterbacks to have a college degree. They want them to graduate. Again, this shows the fastidiousness. This shows a gumption, if you will, that is an intangible that they do still need to measure. They want that work ethic. They want the ability to undertake tasks and accomplish them. So we reach that level of physical proficiency. This is the pool that the NFL is selecting from. Now, you have about 11,000 Division I football players, and you could throw in some of the D2, D3 HBCUs that produce NFL talent as well. Of that pool, you're really only looking at about 800 of those that are considered prospects, and only half of those are considered draftable. This is where you kind of narrow the focus. You don't look to recreate the wheel reinvent the wheel, rather recreate the process by finding somebody outside that group because it just doesn't work. 5'11" guy can't play offensive tackle in the NFL. I'm sorry, he's not going to be able to do it. So we've scaled down that pool that, that we're looking at, right? Okay, so we've gone through all that. We've gone through the production that a player has. Look at that, check that box, or don't check it. Combine, look at that, check that box or don't. Okay, and there's obviously varying levels of it. A guy could be semi-productive and have a great combine or not have a great combine and be super productive. It's not that, it's just he's completely out on one and completely in on the other or vice versa. What it is that there are times where you can look at certain things, certain measurables that are very relevant for a player, particularly, cornerback, wide receiver, 40-yard dash, running back, 40-yard dash, tight end and skill guys, that ability to be able to run like that, linebackers and safeties and so forth. You can look at that and say, okay, this guy was super, super productive, on the field as a cornerback, but we got him to the combine, and it turns out this guy, he's a 4.7 guy. He always found himself in the right place at the right time, but 4.7, jeez, can we really expect this guy to run, with a guy like a CeeDee Lamb, who's, a 4.4 guy, or even the elite guys that are super fast, like, of course, Tyreek Hill, cats like that can really straight up burn. You wonder, you say, wow, can he run with that guy? And so a lot of times this eliminates guys when we talk about the combine, pulling back the curtain and showing certain areas of relevance to what it is that they do, as it relates to those drills, to the 40 times and so forth and so on, right? So we get to the draft. Now, we know that the NFL drafting system is set up to whereas the worst teams get the highest picks. This is in the interest of parity. And every now and then, and you see two examples of that in this year's draft, where Seattle was a playoff team, but Seattle has Denver's first round pick. And so this is a top 5 or top 6 pick, I believe. The Philadelphia Eagles have the New Orleans Saints pick, which is pick number 10. And of course, Philadelphia Eagles were in the Super Bowl. So, but usually it's the bad teams trying to get better, right? There are 4, and some are saying this is inching towards 5, 4 super highly valued positions in the draft: quarterback, pass rushing defensive end, left corner, left tackle. These are your top 4. Many are putting wide receiver into that as well. Although an elite wide receiver is a great thing to have, most teams try to piece together a group. But again, that's if you don't have that elite guy. You always want that elite guy. So invariably that a safety is not going to go first overall. Now, running backs are not going to go first overall. The position has been devalued because of the advent of the passing game. A tight end, a guard, a center's not going to go first overall. They're just not. They can go high, but it's even rare for them to go high in that sense. You start looking for tight ends to go, except of course Pitts went 4th the other year, but he's really unique. But you start looking for the elite ones to go around 10, if they have elite ones in the draft. Safeties 8 to 10 in that if they're super elite. So position-wise, that this is what they're looking for. Okay, now, do teams draft for need? That one is a very interesting question, because the theory is that if you constantly draft for need, you are reaching, because each year the best prospects are the best prospects in that draft, but they might not be as good as prospects at the same position in other drafts. They just stand out because perhaps this draft is weak in that particular area. Now, look, every draft has players, okay? Now, they're not all the 2011 draft, which was insane. Oh, and the quote-unquote quarterback draft, That wasn't just a great quarterback class in that first round. That was a great class in that first round. I think all but one or two of those guys worked out really, really well. That would have been 1983, I believe. So drafting for need can lead to reaching. Okay, then there's the flip side of it. Best player available. Now, that's usually a good way to go, but within reason, you're not going to take a top flight quarterback if you already have your young starting or veteran quarterback who still has a lot of time left in him on the team. You're not going to do that for a variety of reasons. The cap numbers, the experience that the new young quarterback that if you select him highly is expected to get by playing relatively quick. They used to sit him and not play him, but now guys get in and they play pretty much, right away. If not the second year, they're playing the first year. And so you're not going to do that. If you have an outstanding left tackle, odds are you're not going to draft another one. You may draft one if you feel like he can flip and move inside the guard and then take over at left tackle, or if you feel like he can flip and play right tackle and then take over at left tackle. So teams draft for need. They all do, but not necessarily based on what could be seen as a glaring need. In other words, most teams have multiple needs. They do. I mean, look at the champs. The champs have kind of retooled their offensive line a little bit. They've had some transition at receiver. They can use some help at receiver. Offensive line, it's always good to fill in that depth, although they're sitting pretty good there. But they've got some spots that they could show up with some depth. Linebacker, secondary, although their secondary is good, they've got needs. So we just identified the champs who have been really good for a really long time here, man. These past years, certainly since Mahomes entered the league, and even when Alex Smith was there, they were still very good. Everybody has needs. The sweet spot that you want to be in is to have needs. You may have needs that some are more decidedly needs than others. You could be you really could use a cornerback. You really could use a corner. You really could use a DB, right? So this is if you can get into the elite when you will, but you also could use a linebacker. You want the corner. You had your eye on a couple of guys. Turns out they're not there. Linebacker was still high. You're able to move back, pick up an extra pick, and get a linebacker. Of course, the scenario that I'm talking about is when the Cowboys drafted Micah Parsons after Patrick Surtain Jr. and J.C. Horn, their top two corners, went the two picks in front of them. They wanted one of the corners. Didn't happen. So they still needed a linebacker, okay? Micah Parsons, clearly the best linebacker in that draft. Some will argue the best player in that draft and have a fine case for that, is there, but they also know that the two teams behind them, okay, that are selecting, they know that the third team behind those two teams, that they all need a receiver. The Cowboys feel like they'll be able to get Parsons because he's not valued as an edge rusher. If you redid that draft, he wouldn't go 13th. I can tell you that right now. But that's not how it works. But I think a lot of it was that he was not pushed, okay, as a edge guy. And so that, that devalued him. I think if they would have pushed him as that, he would have went a lot higher. But they knew that the two teams behind them needed receivers. And the third team, the Giants, okay, wanted a receiver or actually it was the Eagles, wanted a receiver, and they wanted to jump in front of the Giants, who they knew wanted a receiver. Right? So the Cowboys were like, all right, none of these teams are looking for linebackers. We love Parsons, but hey, we can get him at 13. So we go back a few spots and pick up a third rounder. Okay, pick up a third round draft pick, which that's great draft capital to have. It's fantastic. Teams really value these draft picks, and you still get your guy. You get Micah Parsons, right? So that worked out extremely well for them. And this is the way you want to maneuver through the draft. Yes, you like a guy, take him. Take him. Doesn't matter the positioning. Everybody remembers Draft Day, the movie. Cosner told himself, no matter what, take Vontae Mack. He liked Vontae. Took him at 1, but again, it's a movie, so we're not going to get off into that. But if you like a guy, take him. Also, maneuvering behind the scenes with the personnel guys, for instance, Chuck Noll liked John Stallworth and Lynn Swann as receivers. We all know what a tandem they became. Stellar. Awesome. Probably the best of the 70s. But his draft people were, and he was like, well, listen, are we going to take Swann or are we going to take Stallworth in the first round? Well, his draft people told him Stallworth will be there. You know, Stallworth went to an HBCU. Swann went to USC. He was like, if we don't take Swann now, he won't be there. Stallworth will be there. So they take Swann in the first, and then they end up getting Stallworth in the fourth. How great is that? They got both of who they wanted, and they both turned out great. As spectacular as Swann was, I believe Stallworth was probably slightly better. He was the down in, down out possession guy. Huge plays out of this guy. Huge. And a chain mover and a big dude. So, yes, if you like a guy, take him. But be smart. That's what these teams are trying to do. Now, will teams that are in a position to whereas they've been struggling, they've clearly had a need, okay, oftentimes quarterback. Look at the Jets, okay, they've needed one forever. Are they in such a position that the management, the general manager, the personnel, the people making the picks are saying, look, if we don't get one of these, we're done, which would in turn cause them to possibly reach. We need a pass rusher. You reach, you get a guy, he's not what you thought he would be. Are these teams in that position? Is this where they're at with things in their franchise? Some teams have drafting patterns. The Raiders love speed. They love it. They overvalue it. They draft it early. They draft it late. They love it. They absolutely love it and always have. Now, certainly, you think most teams, if not all, love speed. Sure they do. But the Raiders put a premium on it. Hence the Darius Hayward-Bay selection, you know, that where he went so much higher than people thought. Well, you know, he ran a 4.29, you know. So and what that Hay-Bay turned out to be a bad player. It's just that this was a reach. And so you could see what reaching does if, say, for instance, the Raiders were able to get Hay-Bay in the second round. And I don't know if they had a second round pick then, but let's just say that they were able to get him in the second. And by all accounts, they would have been able to. Well, they could have taken a better player than they took with their second round pick because obviously they got a smaller pool to choose. I mean, a larger pool to choose from, and they're better players earlier in the draft, obviously, right? So this is part of the maneuvering and watching the draft and watching the maneuvering that goes on. Now, one of the speculative things that I like to do is what will they do? What should they do? Then obviously you get the answer with what they end up doing. What will they do? What do you think this team and its personnel people will do? What do you think they'll do? Are they going to take do they have to take a receiver here? Do they need an edge guy? Do they need help up front? You know, they could use a quarterback. This guy's dicey, but, you know, they could use one. Are they going to swing for the fences? Are they going to fill a need? Are they going to take the best player available? What will they do? Then the second part of that is you look at it from your standpoint. What should they do? Who should they take? Who would help them the most and make the most sense for their team? Again, you see, it's fun to speculate. It really is. And while I myself, like you see these cats, at the draft, in their team's gear, Jets, Eagles, right, whatever. And their team will make a pick and the camera flashes to these guys who are in, shoulder pads and painted faces and jerseys, and they don't like the pick, and it's, oh, no, like they're losing it, which is ridiculous and hilarious, but also, too, speaks to the fact that there's a tremendous amount of interest in the NFL draft, and it is fun to speculate, and it does give your team hope without getting a win. You haven't won any games that day, but you're getting hope because you're selecting these guys you think are going to come in and help your football team. That was great for me to watch when Jimmy Johnson took over for the Dallas Cowboys, and it would have been great for me to watch if I was able to watch it while Tom Landry ran the Cowboys. It just was not as big of a deal. It wasn't on all the time, right? It didn't start coming on until later on, and then after that, Jimmy Johnson took over for the Dallas Cowboys as head coach and ran all of their personnel. That was exciting watching him draft. It was exciting watching him draft for the Dolphins because he drafted very well for the Dolphins also. Wow, these are the guys getting to come in. And so it is very interesting. It is. Some people think it's a waste of time. Well, you're not playing a game, but this speaks to the tentacles that the NFL has in terms of its interest on so many levels. And the draft is exciting because, listen, let's face it, you're not playing any games, but you are able to watch highlights of the guy, get some measurables on him. Ooh, he could potentially do this for our team. So the speculative side of it is, for many, like myself, is the most fun. How do they translate? How do they work with what they have? Do they have a surplus at a position because they took the best overall player? Can they then move extra pieces at that surplus position to get more draft capital and get more guys and fill other needs, right? These are the tentacles of this thing, man. It is beautiful, and it is very, very exciting. I believe we're a couple weeks away from that thing. And it is a great sporting event to watch. It's, second only to the games themselves. For me, any other sporting event involving the NFL, watching the draft is second only to the games. So it's great fun. Make your mock. See if you maybe know a little bit more about how these cats think, or if you just know a little bit more about football than some of these cats. It's fun to speculate. It's the absolute best, right? For a person like me who loves the research and development side of things, this is the ultimate R&D convention. We've looked at where we're at. We've looked at what the prospects have done. We've looked at what we need to progress and to get better. Now, after our research, we will select and continue the development of our existing product. It is great, man. It's fantastic fun. I don't have any mocks for you or any lists. I stopped doing that a while back. It's still fun. I just don't really do it anymore. Go make one of your own. Go look at the ones that are out there. Look at the teams. Look at your team, what they need, who's available. Look at the kids. Look at their workout film. Look at their game production film. Look at the combine measurables, right? Download all the data, man. You know what I'm saying? Download all the data. Put it in your brain pan. And then put yourself in the spot of these cats that are making the picks. What should they do? What will they do? It's a fun way to speculate from both sides. These idiots will do blank here. They should do blank here. You know, it's all about how teams draft. The Cowboys used to swing for the fences to try to hit home runs on every draft pick. Baltimore ran counter to that. Meanwhile, while Baltimore was very good, the Cowboys were incredibly mediocre to below average. Baltimore kept getting solid draft picks, okay? Solid draft picks instead of trying to hit home runs. It's speculative, people. You don't win games per se that particular day, but in a way, if you do it right, you win games in the future. If you're the 90s Cowboys, you win Super Bowls based off your great draft classes, like any of the 70s Cowboys, 70s Steelers, 80s Niners, aughts Patriots. Those guys draft well, And so you, in a sense, are winning games, plural, at the draft. If you do it right, you're setting your team on a great course with moving timelines in terms of player window. It's not just how long the player could play, how long can the player play at a high level. Because if you're great, you can fall off to good and you can still play at this level. But greatness is different than just being good. And again, there's all kinds of ways to view this thing. I think that the NFL has got some of its processes wrong in terms of they want to project a player to play for 10 years and be, a starter, an all-pro, and all. Look, you want that out of your high picks. I get that. Certainly the first pick in the draft. I get that. I understand that. But you have other needs of, the quote-unquote worker bees in the hive, special teams, filling in on your situational defenses and offenses, right? You need those guys too, okay? And that's why I believe that they're going to have to expand the player pool and teams are going to start looking at it differently. What it will take for that to happen, a team will have success by drafting non-stars. And they will be able to look at over a period of time of how they drafted these non-stars later. And they only played for them for a couple of years, right? With some overlap in there at these specialized positions, but they performed relatively well. And then they were out and you got somebody else in. And your team was able to maintain a period of somewhat extended excellence. Because in addition to the stars that you had, you were able to fill in with these other guys. And in certain areas, you lost no productivity, and it was good productivity, obviously. And teams are going to start looking at cats differently because of the dwindling pool of players at the high school level. It just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Fewer people play football these days. It's not like when I was coming up, you wanted to play, you had to play, you were going to play. Athletes do other stuff. I get it. That's fine. I understand. It's all free will here, people. Anyway, enjoy the draft. There are players in every draft. There's excitement in every draft. And you're projecting on what you're going to get, yes. And you're not winning actual games draft day. But as I said before, you are winning games and you are winning championships at the NFL draft. You just don't know it yet. Johnny Kane time here, JCT. It has been Johnny Kane time back in West Uptown. And I want to thank y'all for joining me. Enjoy the draft. It's going to be like any of the other ones. There's going to be players in it. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting. A lot of fun speculation enhanced by social media and the like. The things that the kids do these days, man. It's groovy. It's a stone groove. It's a gas. Thank y'all for watching, listening. Enjoy the draft, and peace. I'm out.